Final expert for the evening is Alice Irving, who's a barrister with Doughty Street Chambers, a civil and public practitioner specializing in education, community care, housing, and social welfare, and discrimination law. She has a particular interest in the rights of disabled persons, and her specialisms mean that she's ideally placed to advise disabled clients holistically across multiple legal areas that impact upon their lives. Alice has represented clients in a wide range of public law challenges and has appeared in the High Court and the Court of Appeal. Alice, thank you very much for being here.
Thanks very much. So I wanted to talk a little bit first about routes to the bar. I think you probably know sort of loosely what a barrister is and how the chamber system works, but I can also talk to that a bit. And then I wanted to talk not just about my own experience, but some of my colleagues, because there are many ways to come to the bar. And there's a really big bottleneck to get pupillage, and it can be a bit intimidating. And I want to encourage you to think kind of not necessarily about rushing to that, and being open to doing other things and getting life experiences before coming to the bar, if that's something that you're interested in. And then I'd like to talk a bit about my practice areas, because they're not areas of law that are particularly thought about when people think about human rights. And partly that's because we don't have socioeconomic rights in this country to enforce. But it's a thing that I'm sort of very passionate about, that we think about the kind of base level needs that people have and those areas of law that fulfill those. And those are areas of law that I was never exposed to really during my educational journey. I'd never learned anything about homelessness law and the provision for the homeless. I'd never learned anything about social care law. I didn't know anything about educational provision for disabled children. That's all stuff I've learned once I've gotten into practice, and I've realized there's this huge area of practice that exists that I didn't know about, that's incredibly impactful for people's lives, and to my mind is a fundamental sort of human rights issue that you can get into if you're interested in that kind of thing. I think one of the things that struck me about what you said is thinking about where you locate yourself, if you've got some kind of sense of politics or some kind of sense of justice, and where in that system you might fit, whether it's as a politician, whether it's as a lawyer, maybe what kind of lawyer. And I think what strikes me about my practice and why I've landed where I've landed is possibly right back at the beginning when I started doing undergraduate, and I learned something about myself. So in New Zealand, it's very common to do a double degree. A law degree is 4 years, a BA in a law degree is 5 years. There's no such thing as a conversion course. So most people do a double degree. You get a BA in something and law. I started out as a philosophy student, and within a year, although I loved it, felt a bit detached from what was on the ground around me. And I transferred to being effectively a social work student. So all of my peers were training to be social workers. If I'd done a year of placements after my BA, I would have been a social worker. And I think at that sort of stage, I found sort of in myself a realization that something about an immediate human connection was really important to me. So I love ideas. I will get to this. I did a DPhil. But for me to feel fulfilled and to feel that kind of sense of impact, working face to face with individuals, is a really important part of that. And so that's one way as a lawyer in the areas that I practice in that you can position yourself, or you can be functioning much more at a higher level, policy level. And there are pros and cons for all of those, and how suited you are to each of those will depend a little bit on your personality and your quirks and your skill set. But kind of winding back then to how we get to the bar. So for myself, I've sort of did undergrad, got a scholarship to come here, and did the master's. Stayed on to do the DPhil. It took me an incredibly long time, did some teaching, which I really enjoyed. And at the end of that, decided that I'd give it a crack and go to the bar. That is sort of a fairly, in some ways, orthodox route to certain kinds of chambers. And it's a sort of fairly burnished credential to be like BCL, DPhil. I work alongside some of the most amazing lawyers whose route was undergrad, law centre caseworker, 5 years. And they have the most remarkable knowledge and experience because of that. And in a similar way, you came straight out of university and started doing that kind of frontline casework. I'm not sure that there's actually any substitute for that kind of experience. So I have colleagues in housing law who they did a similar kind of duty scheme. They'd turn up at the county court and they did, 5 minutes, 10 minutes with clients, and then they'd go into court and they'd stop them from losing their home. And that's what they did day in, day out. And I don't know anybody who knows that area of law better than the people that did that work. So I want to encourage you to think not necessarily just about what's kind of shiny. And I definitely was guilty of that. I was like, look, I can get my DPhil. I'm a big cheese. And if you're doing a DPhil, great. I loved it. And I wouldn't give it back. but also to think about, how am I getting involved in those communities? How am I getting that frontline experience? And if you're wanting to work in a way that I'm passionate about working, what is it to really actually embed yourself in that experience and to start learning what that looks like and what people actually need, rather than your kind of ideas of what it is to turn up as a lawyer and sort of fix things for people. So a big part of my social work education was actually about not turning up with a solution, but turning up and listening to people and then responding to that. And I think if you've got that kind of ethic as a lawyer, that's very challenging, because the law is top down, and it tells you, it says, this is your life, this is how the law divides it, I will tell you how to fix that. And a huge, I think, task, if you're the kind of lawyer that has the kind of passion I have, is about translating the law into a way that works and empowers people who are very, very disempowered, and also trying to translate their needs and wants into a legal language that might achieve something for them where there's a really terrible fit. So journeys to the bar, you can go that long kind of academic route, and then I went straight to the bar after the DPhil. You might not do, a full-blown postgrad. Spending time at places like Justice, that I know Daniela worked with, and many other NGOs, is an excellent route. Again, you're going to be exposed to really interesting, fantastic work. I know people that have gone via PLP to the bar who are in an amazing position. So that kind of route is a good option. But I really want to champion today law centres. It's not sexy. A lot of people think it's kind of a step down, and people do look down their noses at that kind of work, but it's some of the most vital work. And if you're politically engaged, those people are some of the most incredible people that you'll meet. There's those old sort of legal aid champions who are literally 40, 50 caseworkers their whole lives, and they're some of the most remarkable people that I could meet. Coming back to one of the things Arabella said as well, I think about, you need to find your tribe and your community that's going to keep you going. Those are the kind of places that if you've got a very particular politics, and if maybe you're sort of passionate about social justice, you go to the bar. That can be challenging in terms of the politics around you. Having those communities, and again, the sort of the legal aid lawyers networks are remarkable things. So that's my kind of think about law centre work. Plug. There are multiple routes to the bar. I'm very happy to speak to anybody who's interested in this afterwards about my experience coming to the bar in any way I can assist. I know pupillage gateway is, pending. The other thing I wanted to share before I go into the kind of work I do a little bit more is I think the other thing that happens at the bar is barristers are kind of a bit egotistical, and we're self-promoting. We're the kind of person who puts our hand up and turns up, and we are our product. We're self-employed by and large. There are sort of employed barristers. And so we always need to present to the world in a way that's, I'm shining, I'm complete, please hire me. It can be very difficult, I think, looking at people who've got to the bar and seeing their CVs and profiles and thinking about whether that's possible. I didn't get kept on after my pupillage. And I'd never failed at anything in my life because I'd come straight through, scholarship to Oxford, etc., from little old New Zealand. And it was at the time devastating. In hindsight, one of the best things that could have happened to me, because I've landed somewhere that's a much better fit for me. When that happened, so many people came out of the woodworks and said, I failed too early in my career. And you just don't know that. So I just want to encourage you in that journey, because pupillage also, getting pupillage, or once you've got pupillage, getting tenancy, this process, some people sail through, but for other people then can be setbacks and rejections. There are loads of fantastic, fantastic barristers who've been through that, and you would never know that from their profiles. I remember at the time, someone who just won sort of public law lawyer of the year, she sort of emailed me and said, I did a third six, do you want to talk about it? And I would never have known. So just to encourage you that no matter how shiny people look from the outside, all of us kind of have slightly tortured journeys. So the kind of work I do a mixture of things that very much resonate with that kind of social work ethic that I picked up right in my undergrad. I do a lot of homelessness work, and I do a lot of schlubbing around in county courts trying to stop people from being evicted. It's not sexy, it's really important. Out of that comes some strategic litigation. And so you do a mixture, at least if you're doing a kind of practice that I do, of lots of low level getting around, getting some time in court, which is great if you love advocacy, right through to being led on some sort of big strategic judicial review cases. So if you're thinking about going to the bar, I think one of the things you want to think about is, I think different chambers are set up in different ways to do this. So there are some chambers, if you go in as a public law junior, that are, very prestigious chambers, you're much more likely to be being brought on regularly to very large high-profile cases as a junior, and that will be quite a big part of your caseload. I have a little bit of that, and I have a lot of frontline face-to-face work with some of the most disadvantaged people in our communities. Now, sometimes I'm envious of people who are on those big cases all the time, but I also think, and again, want to encourage people to think about, I guess, what they want to get out of it. And if you think you've got the kind of people skills and that social connection, because that's a really big part of it, to work with people directly and make that direct impact, I'd really encourage you to think about doing some of the legwork right at the front line. So I do the housing, I do social care disputes, mostly about disabled individuals, mostly children, and their families who are not receiving support. And I do a lot of special educational needs work, which is similar. And in relation to all of these things, there are always sort of overarching strategic challenges that can come out of that work eventually. But a lot of what we do is day in, day out county court tribunal work. Just trying to think what else to say. I've given the plug for the frontline work. I think pros and cons of the bar, if we're going to be frank, this kind of work is emotionally taxing. One of the things about being a barrister that is a privilege, and I have so much respect for the solicitors I work with, and hats off, is that I'm one removed from clients. I do work with and meet clients, and it's really important that I have empathy and can engage with them, but I'm not the first person they meet. I do not take their full histories. They're not the person that I get, I'm not the person who gets the phone call when something's going horribly wrong, when they've suddenly street homeless. That's my solicitors. For me, that helps me to be able to safely function in the area and stay sort of sane and well, because I don't actually think I could do what the solicitors who instruct me do, and I have enormous respect for them. But I'm kind of aware of my limitations because it is very affecting work. I think the bar is bad at talking about that. We're getting better at talking about vicarious trauma, but largely in areas that are kind of more criminal focused and that kind of thing. I also think the bar is not an easy profession if you've got any kind of additional needs for yourself to manage in terms of accessibility. I mean, we've still got all of the gender, the race, the class, that everything pay gaps. Disability-wise, it's quite inaccessible. Just a brief plug again, if anybody's interested in coming to the bar. I'm a member of an organisation called BLEMI, which is Barristers with Lived Experience of Mental Illness, and we have everyone from aspiring barristers through to current barristers who have lived experience, current or not current, of that, and talking about how you navigate that at the bar. And that's an enormous blind spot. I think it's still a place where there's a lot of putting on a kind of a brave face and pretending to be perfect. So I think I want to add that just to encourage you that if you've got kind of complexity in your life, it's a challenging job, but it's possible. It's a challenging job. It's can be incredibly tiring, incredibly difficult in terms of deadlines. Court deadlines do not move. I wish my default deadlines were back where they would just sort of slip indefinitely into the future. So it's tough, but it's doable, even if you have sort of additional needs with the right kind of support and kind of cohort around you. And again, I just want to encourage you that there are those of us at the bar that are doing that and talking about it actively. Pros and cons. Fluctuating income. Let's be honest about this. I'm predominantly a legal aid lawyer. Legal aid agency will pay me 2 years from when I've done the work. In a public law case, if we don't get permission, I don't get paid for a chunk of the work. If we get permission and when I get inter partes, so market rates, if we get permission and lose, I get legal aid rates, which are substantially lower. So any kind of financial planning and stability is quite difficult. Having said that, in the areas I practice, you're more than able to make a good living. With some good clerking teams and some good support. But I think now, I'm aware, I think we've run over quite a lot because we've had a lot to say. I'm around if anybody wants to talk. You can also find me online, and I'm always willing to respond to inquiries from people thinking about coming to the bar and wanting to talk about the pros and cons, or thinking about coming to the bar and navigating mental health issues. It's something I'm passionate about supporting people to do. So thanks.